All right, it looks like we are live. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sitting next to Denise Morrison, only the 12th CEO of the 144-year-old Campbell Soup Company. I'm Amanda Pouchot, the co-founder of Labo League, a career community for Gen Y women, and I'm extremely grateful for the opportunity that I've had to get to know you over this last year.
Well, likewise.
To hear your stories and to kind of get into the mind of what it's really like to be a Fortune 500 CEO, and also have the chance to get to know Denise and to get to know her as a role model. And one of the things we were discussing before this was learning about her path to getting where she is. I also have 5 other entrepreneurs and experts joining us, and we're going to get to them in a little bit because first I want to talk with you.
Okay, great.
If you want to ask questions, go ahead and just tweet with the hashtag CEO Denise, and we'll try to work them in as well. Okay, I have to start. You are a Fortune 500 CEO. You oversee 17,000 employees. Last year, you did $7.5 billion in sales, and you're launching 200 products this year. I just look at that, and it's like, wow. And I think the first question, and I'm sure a lot of people want to know, is where do you start? Where did you start with your career, and how did you get to where you are now?
Well, where I am now, first of all, is such an honor to be the leader of this wonderful company. And I remember when I achieved the goal, and I called my parents and I said, "Mom, Dad, I did it. I achieved my life goal." And there was a pause, and my father said, "Denise, that's great. What's your next goal?" And I think that's been the story of my life. And I answered him by saying, "I want to build a great company." And when I go back to how I started my career, I actually started my career in sales with Procter & Gamble, and was the first woman hired in their paper division, going store to store and stocking shelves and building displays. I fell in love with the food business. And I think, and you could read the bio, but the thread throughout over 35 years in my career has been the food business, and I think I've worked in every aisle. And so going from sales to brand marketing to working in a manufacturing plant, I did a zigzag instead of a ladder climb in order to really be able to get to my end game destination, which was to lead a company. And so here I am, and now I'm building a great one. So
incredible.
Thanks for asking.
And I think one of the things that we're really focusing on today is taking risks in your career.
Yes.
So what are kind of some of the biggest risks you've taken?
Well, I think there's been times in my career where I've contemplated changing positions. I mean, one of the biggest risks I had presented to me was moving from sales to marketing, because when I first started in business, everyone talked to me about the ladder and how to climb the ladder. And so here the president of Nestle was coming to me saying, I see something in you, I'd like you to go into brand management. And I said, I've never even had a marketing course. So but I took the risk. It was the best thing I ever did, because I got P&L responsibility. I designed my own training program. I checked into advertising agencies. I made product implants. And I really learned something different and new. And I grew by leaps and bounds in the process. And so I've never looked back, because I've cherished the experience I've had learning about the customer, but also about the brands.
And now leading such a storied brand as Campbell, how do you inspire your team to take risks? Because you're doing so much innovation right now, and taking risks is inherently risky. There's kind of a fear of failure at times. How do you help your team take risks?
It's a really big insight that the antithesis of being innovative is having fear and stress about taking risks and making a mistake. And if you really think about it, sometimes it's riskier not to act. I mean, we're in a world today that's moving at a very rapid pace. I don't have to tell you. You all are leading it there. And quite frankly, if you don't put yourself out there a little bit and don't be afraid to make some mistakes, then you allow yourself to dream and create. First of all, work is much more rewarding, and second of all, you find that you can think of things that consumers want, for example, that they didn't even know they wanted, and so it's very, very rewarding. But I would say it's calculated risk taking. You've got to have a fact base. You've got to do your homework. In my business, you have to listen to the consumer. The consumer will take you where they want to go or where they would like to go, and just being with them every step of the way is really important. So it's not just reckless risk, it's calculated risk. And the one other thing that's critically important is always do it with the highest integrity. Don't ever do anything wrong. You have to be very honest with yourself about always do the right thing.
Yeah, I think that what you say about it's riskier not to act is something that always reminds me to make sure, even if I'm terrified or I'm worried about maybe being embarrassed about something that I do, I still need to do it. So I'm wondering, do you remember one of the first big risks that you took?
Yes, and what's the worst thing that could happen? You think about it, you make a mistake, you analyze what went wrong, you take those lessons learned and you reapply them, and you might come up with a bigger and better idea as a result of it. So I think that there's a method to turning mistakes into a positive. And we've got leadership, Steve Jobs, for example. Mm-hmm. There wouldn't be a Macintosh if he hadn't developed a Lisa, and the Lisa didn't work. And so he learned from that and was able to reapply. I find that inspirational.
I really like that story, because I think one of the things as a young professional, as a young entrepreneur, it can be really scary to know you're going to make mistakes, and that it is okay to make mistakes, and that that's how you learn.
Right, and as a leader of a company, you've got to create an environment where it's okay to make mistakes. And so we had Malcolm Gladwell come and speak to our leadership team. He was really awesome. And he talked about fail fast, fail cheap, fail often, and creating environments that allow people to do that in the spirit of innovation. And so we literally do have innovation breakthrough teams at Campbell's, and their mandate is, listen to the consumer, push out there, and make mistakes, reapply, and you'll know when you get a winner.
I want to shift a little bit, because some of the questions I got ahead of time were about how do you make it work? You are a mother of two wonderful young women and you have two grandchildren.
Michelle and Kelly are my daughters, and Mackenzie and Nolan are my new grandchildren in the last 5 months.
So how do you make it all work? And did you see a change in your appetite for risk after you had children?
It's a very interesting question, and one that even my daughters ask today, and that's, Mom, how do you make it all work together? Because both of them are working and have the children. And it's interesting, when I had them, nobody really talked to me about work-life balance. It just didn't exist. And as I looked at it, it's really more about work-life integration. You need to think about your life as a whole life and integrate your family with your work, and learn to set priorities in total. I read a life-changing book, and I've actually recommended it to our network, and that is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. It's not a new book, but it's a great book that talks about this work-life integration concept. And I'll tell you what, when you have children, you become much more organized, because you don't waste time. Time is precious, and you get your work done, and your priorities are set with your family. And you know what? There are days when one has to give and the other. You learn teamwork with your spouse, and you also, every family situation is different. You also learn that there's a whole multiplier effect around you to make it work out. Child care, plan A, plan B. I always talk about have plan A, but Mackenzie might get sick, and then you have to have plan B.
Yeah.
And so just trying to be ahead of it and organized and prioritizing, it teaches you some really good life skills. But I'll tell you what, both are so rewarding. It's one of the wonderful things about being a woman today. You can have it all.
And I love that you say that. And I think one of the things we discussed before this conversation was how things have changed.
Yes.
And what it was like when you started out your career.
Well, think about it. I mean, when I started my career, there was no daycare. There was no child care. I had to advertise in a church bulletin for a babysitter. I mean, and then I'd had an interview sheet to see if there were common values and a happy home. And so it's very interesting. Today, there's so many resources, but you have to think of asking for help as a strength and not a weakness. And admit to yourself that you can't do it all by yourself, and that your relationship with your children is going to be over the course of time. And they know that, I always say, delegate the tasks, but not the responsibility. So parenting is the responsibility. Who cares who does the laundry, really? And so that frees you up time when you delegate the tasks to do more of the parenting. And, I learned some of those things the hard way, so I'll just pass that on because that's what I'm about. So.
And now, as, a leader of a very powerful company, what have you done to help, the women and the men here who want to have work-life integration?
Well, at Campbell's, actually with Beth Jolly, we conducted some focus groups, internal focus groups with men, an all-boy one, an all-girl one, and then a mixed one. And I asked, people that were in, different family situations, what is it that we need to do at Campbell's to make your life and work easier for you? And it's very interesting. Everybody processed it a different way, but everybody came out with basically the same list. And whether they had children or they had cats or whether they had aging parents, it's so interesting. People just need some flexibility. They need to be trusted to deliver results, and they need some flexibility. And so we said, well, we can do some things at Campbell's that give people more flexibility. Simple things like every meeting has a dial-in number. So if somebody can't be there face-to-face, they can at least have an opportunity to participate. We toyed with core meeting hours, so we don't start a meeting till 9, or we don't start one after 4. So we give people some flexibility on the bookends of the day. Those are 2 ideas, but there's many more like that. But companies can actually help create cultures to make it easier for people.
I think that's really great, and I'm really excited to see other companies take on those practices, because I know it's not just women, but it's all people.
It is. It's everybody.
Want flexibility, and I think that it's great that you're leading the way doing that.
Now you got to get the work done. I mean, delivering the results is, you don't get a pass on that. You just have to be sometimes a little bit more creative about how you do it.
So is there, taking it back a bit to risk, is there a risk that you haven't taken that you wish you had taken?
The only thing I can say, and of course my organization will not agree with this, is I wish I could go faster. But it's really important in leadership that you get buy-in for ideas. You listen to people along the way. You may have an instinct or a gut on something, but just getting perspectives that are different, the idea could get bigger. But my DNA is always about get there and get there fast. And so I know that about myself, so I really want to make sure I'm thorough about getting people to tell me the truth. Throw a wet blanket on it, do whatever it takes, because it's better if you think about things before you do them and anticipate them, and then it'll help you minimize the mistakes that you make.
Yeah, I really like that. Is there, so in personal risk-taking, as you kind of have looked across your career journey, is there a certain person or a group of people or that you turn to when evaluating tough decisions that you have to make?
Yeah, I'm very blessed because I have a number of people in my life that I can do that with. For one, I have my sister, who is also a CEO of Frontier Communications, and I have 2 other sisters too who I have great relationships with. But beyond that circle, I mean, there are a number of people. You can't do you can't do this by yourself. You have to always kind of surround yourself with people who are going to give you rich perspectives and seek that out. And I just think that there's a real benefit to that, but it's not one way. You have to also be willing to give to that relationship as well. I mean, just the millennial group that we've been talking to, I can't tell you, I was so excited about meeting all of these women because I wanted to share with them. I've gotten so much joy back, and that was not anticipated. And I'm learning along the way too. So keeping yourself open to learning and evolving, I think, is really, really important.
And along the idea of learning and evolving, one of the questions that I see a lot in talking to other Gen Y, is what do I do? I'm in a job and I'm doing well at that job, but it's not necessarily what I'm passionate about. What do I do? What if I was coming to you and asking you that? What would the advice be that you would give to me?
Oh, I've got really good advice for you. Well, first of all, I've stepped back and I've done a lot of speaking about this because I'm really passionate about that question. And that is, I observe that women are passionate about brands, and they're very strategic about building brands, or writing strategic plans about companies, or thinking about writing plans about communities, but they don't think about writing it for themselves. And I mean writing as a metaphor, but stepping back and saying, where have I been? Where am I now? Where am I going, and how am I going to get there, and who can help me? So a strategic approach to a career, not job to job to job to job, but what is my end game? What do I dream about being? Now, that's a hard question to answer, and guess what? You have to be honest with yourself, and you could change your mind, so it's not that scary. But, just sitting by yourself one day and saying, at the end of this rainbow, what do I want it to look like? What do I dream about? That's when I said, at a very young age, I'd like to run a company. I didn't know it was called CEO. I just knew directionally that's what I wanted to do. And so if you set the end game, then you can say, okay, well, what experiences have I had to date? Where am I now? And then what do I have to do to get where I want to be? And then who's done those jobs? And who can I talk to? And who can mentor me? And who can sponsor me? And how can I learn more about getting from where I am to there? And it puts you in control of it, and it also will help you really examine what are you passionate about and what don't you want to do under any circumstances.
I think the what don't you want to do is it's sometimes hard to feel comfortable saying, I don't want to do this.
And what's the worst that can happen, though? You might get into a job and you just don't like it, and you say, okay, I don't like it, I learned this, I'm moving on. But you have a plan, and I think that really puts you a little bit more in control.
I like that answer. What's the worst that can happen? I learn from it, and I move to the next thing.
Right.
I'm moving forward, in this idea of always moving forward.
So I think one of the myths that I've observed is women think that companies are going to take care of them and move them along like school. You do a good job, you get an A, you get promoted. And I think women need to take charge and make sure that those opportunities happen. And I don't think that happens by yourself. I think that happens along with others. Your manager obviously is a big part of that. But if you have a plan, then your performance reviews are approached differently. It's like, how can this performance review inform how do I get to my plan? How does it inform how I dialogue with my manager? How does it inform what mentors I need to help me do what I want to do? And the contribution to the companies along the way, which is important. But you also feel like you're growing and developing too. And you'll get so many bosses in your career, you can't possibly expect one of them to own that. You need to own it,
That's really, really strong advice. You need to own it. And what you're saying is so important for me to hear, and I'm sure everyone else here. I love the piece of it's riskier sometimes not to act. To not think you're in this alone. You have people. You cannot do it by yourself. And you have people to turn to, and you should look to people to turn to. And that, look at risk and calculated risk taking. And is it getting you to the place you want to go? And understand that it's okay to maybe make mistakes.
Right. And I think if you step back and say, I have two choices in life. I can either lead it or be a victim of it. What's my choice? I think it's more fun to lead it.
I completely agree. And, I'm going to bring in our entrepreneurs and experts that are joining us. And I see Anna. And Anna Curran is the founder of print-on-demand startup cookbookcreate.com. And so, Anna, kind of hearing all of this advice, I would love to hear about how you took a huge risk. You started your own company, and what kind of process did you go through?
It's funny. I joke with many of my friends who are also entrepreneurs, and, the statistics basically tell you that you have a 1% chance of succeeding. And to me, it never really occurred that I had the opportunity to fail. My dream was to found a company, and failure for me was not going forward and taking the risk to found the company.
Awesome.
And that totally plays into the theme about it's sometimes riskier not to take the chance.
Failure is not an option, right?
Yeah. Brooke Moreland is the founder of fascism.com, an online destination for crowdsourced fashion advice. So kind of in that crowdsourced idea, who do you turn to, and what is some of the advice you got about risks you've taken?
Sure. I was really lucky, I think, when I was starting my company. In New York, there's tons of female entrepreneurs here and male entrepreneurs. It's a great, great community. And I found people very responsive. I would just kind of cold email some people I knew and ask to have a coffee and ask to talk things out. And usually people were pretty responsive and pretty honest about, kind of the risks of failure. And one piece of advice I got and that I always think about is, think about the worst possible scenario. What could go wrong if the absolute worst scenario happens? And once you think through that and realize, even if that happens, I'm still going to be fine. Even the worst thing, it's still going to be okay. And that, I think, that's very comforting to me.
I think that it's great to hear all these themes coming up.
Well, I think one of the best phrases I heard, I think it was Jamie Dimon from J.P. Morgan. He said, "I always look for the wow, the best of the best, and wow stands for worst of the worst, and then prepare for it."
So we're also joined by Lindsay Holmes, and she created and runs Usable Tech Companies, a digital marketing and tech firm specializing in social media campaign strategy. So Lindsay, part of what your role is to encourage companies and other people to, launch these social media strategies, and that's a bit risky sometimes for companies that have never explored social media. So how do you encourage other people to take risks?
Well, I was broke for about 5 years into my business because no one knew what social media was. So, I had to educate, to convince, to come back. So, it's all been a risk from, the consultations to, actually just sort of saying, this is what I love to do, this is what I'm good at, I am a pioneer, but I have to take the risk and push through because I know that this is what I want to do. So I guess the advice that I would have is just, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, that you have to know that that's synonymous with risk. If you're not willing to take a risk, then entrepreneurship is not about not working for anyone. In fact, you work for yourself, which is, more grueling than working for anyone else can be, and you'll find. So my main piece of advice is, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to be okay with risk. You have to take it, and sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not. But at your core, if you're an entrepreneur and you love what you do, then you'll be okay getting back up.
I love the referral to being a pioneer, because I sometimes use that myself. When I was coming up the ranks in business, it's like you go where no one's been before and you blaze that trail. So good for you, Lindsay.
Yes, I think another thing I'm hearing a lot is this idea of being passionate about what you're doing and being driven by passion, and that really gets you through taking maybe the more riskier things you have to do. And so Molly, I'm going to turn to you. Molly Galler is one of the most buzzworthy bloggers out of Boston, and she writes about millennial culture. And so I'd love to hear kind of some of what are the biggest risks you face, and also kind of the risks you're seeing other millennials take.
Sure. I think for me there was a big risk in going into a really saturated market. There are a lot of people that are writing about the city of Boston, about food, about fashion, about art and music, kind of taking the risk to say, I have a really strong opinion here and something that people want to hear and need to hear in a perspective that is new and different. And I think, I also work a full-time job, so to decide to take the risk of putting that additional time and investment and resources against something that is, for all intents and purposes, a side gig. And I think when you know that you're offering something that is going to stand out, you ask yourself those questions, like many of the ladies have mentioned, about, what's the worst case scenario? Okay, maybe people don't read it. That's not so bad a worst case scenario. And I think many of the other millennials who I work with and who have come to read the site have been so open about why don't you try this, or why don't you add more video, or start asking for more input and do polls. I think people are really interested in being a part of something, and so they're willing to take the risk with you, which is kind of exciting.
And that's a great lead into Megan. Megan Berry is the Director of Community at Rebel Mouse. And Megan, I know that you were the 4th employee at another startup, and so kind of would love to hear about how your career path into going into startups.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me on here. I actually think I was looking, you guys sent over some questions about like some biggest risks we've taken in our careers, and I was thinking about that as I was listening here. And moving from Clout and SF, where I joined as the 4th employee, to New York was definitely on my list of the sort of that career moment where I was definitely at a hot startup and I was really happy with what I was doing, but I started to see kind of in my path I was ready for the next thing. And initially when I came to New York, I was working with Rebel Mouse, but we didn't yet really have enough money for me to get paid. So I was doing consulting across a number of startups, and that was very scary, but it ended up being like one of the most rewarding things I've ended up doing. And so I think that you have to take risks to get that big reward. And now as I look at it, I think you become like a little bit of a risk junkie because you can get that huge high when it works out.
A risk junkie. That's a good one. I'm going to use that one too.
I like that. And I really like that, we're hearing a lot about this idea that it is really scary to take risk. And I'm wondering if everyone can kind of chime in. Maybe we'll go back and start with Anna. But what is your advice for facing down your fears? Is there something that you do? Is there someone that you talk to? Kind of just if you could give a piece of advice on that. Yeah.
Sure. So that's a great question. There's a quote, and it includes a curse, which I won't share with you all, the R-rated version right now. But basically, it says, if you've never been scared out of your mind in your lifetime, you've never actually lived. And whenever I feel a tremendous amount of fear, I like to say the original version of that quote with the curse in it. And it snaps things into focus, and it reminds me that it's only life, and you're only here for a short while, and you should just move towards your fear and live. And and that's always been something of great comfort for me.
Yeah. Brooke, do you want to share something?
Yeah, I tend to kind of balance when I think about the risk and the worst possible scenario of something with everything else that is good and great and strong, and it helps me kind of even it out. So if I'm taking a big career risk, then I'll think, well, my personal life is going really good, so that's something that no one can take away from me if I do this one thing. And just kind of balance it and keep everything centered in perspective and kind of the greater picture helps me kind of come down to earth on that.
Denise, I'm going to ask you now. What is the kind of one thing or something that helps you get through the fear?
Well, I just like the idea of creating, and I call it disciplined creativity, just having the discipline to do things with quality, but not being afraid to go where no one else has gone before and create something new. I get a real charge out of that. So I'm with you. You go around once, you might as well go for it, right?
Lindsay, what about you?
Yeah, I think for me, fear is relative. So what I often do is, see if I can find the value in everything. So from a fearful situation to a situation that I might find time wasting, or whatever the pressures that you go through as an entrepreneur, I make sure that I can find the value, some kind of value in everything. So, if I'm, afraid to speak on a stage, I also think about the fact that I'll probably get some really good digital content out of that then I can then put on my speaker page and get more speaking opportunities so that I can get better and better and get paid more and more, for example. So, I mean, you can find, little value in everything. I've been going through this thing lately, not necessarily about fear, but I guess greater about consultations and charging for them and wasting time and feeling like I only have this little bit of time to do everything I need to do. So I have this fear of time wasting. But what I've done again is said, okay, maybe there are some skills that I need to brush up on. So preparing for this consultation, this free consultation, allows me to sit and do something that I wouldn't typically do. So there's the value in that. So just looking for the value, whatever it is, in everything you do.
And that goes back to learning from everything. No matter what you're doing, you always want to be learning.
That's right.
Molly, what about you?
So I always think about it as, if you're standing on the cliff and you're deciding whether or not you're going to jump, what is it that's down there at the bottom? So what am I trying to get to? So I remind myself, if I'm thinking about, redesigning the site, or I'm thinking about hiring more employees, and that feels like such a big risk to take, can I really support that? And what is going to come out of this? I kind of remind myself what it is that I'm working towards. Denise said earlier, trajectory for yourself and work towards that course. I think it's a lot about that. It's why am I afraid of this, and what is accomplishing this going to achieve? And I try to shift the fear over to the happiness of achieving that goal and just shift my mindset to that end result.
I love that. I think, that the end, seeing the goal, you saw a goal early on, and everything that you did, you were trying to get to that goal.
Right. It's defining the end game, and then the path that leads to it.
Megan, I'd love to hear your advice, too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's one I've completely figured out, but as much as possible, I try to turn fear into like action items I can do something about. So if I'm unsure about the next step, can I ask people for advice? Going back to Denise's thing of it's a strength to be able to ask for help. Like that's been hugely helpful for me. And then also I've learned that like the fear often makes me perform better. So kind of, taking that in and just going with it and doing what I can.
This is great. Now, I wish we could stay and talk for the rest of the day.
Me too.
I'm walking away with so much more confidence right now to go and face what's ahead of me. And I got a question in here from Twitter, and it will be our last question, unfortunately, because we're running a little bit over. But Jenny Merrow asked, how closely did you follow a 5 to 10 year plan? So you talked a bit about having your own plan, but did you ever deviate from it?
Well, I think you've got to leave yourself enough flexibility in a plan that opens you up to opportunities. But I literally had a chart. I mean, a chart of, the positions that I had when I had it. And I actually, when I mentor, I actually encourage people to do this, because if you look at your career horizontally, it just paints a different picture. You can pick out gaps, experiences that you need to get, etc. And so I think that I think it's one of those things that I definitely have used it, and I still use it.
So I actually just found out we get to have more time with you. So I got a note that says we don't have to end. I'm really excited.
Okay. There is one thing I wanted to just, as I was listening to everybody's insight around failure and fear, and one of the things I learned over the years, and I did learn it the hard way, is don't take yourself so seriously. Sometimes when you're in the moment, you think that this is like the most important thing in the universe, and then you have to step back and say, we're talking about soup, or we're talking about goldfish. And then you start to say, well, now that I've freed myself up from taking myself so seriously, what do we really think we want to do? And quite frankly, it just emancipates you. And so just, lighten up a little bit sometimes, and you'll find that your brain will kick in and do amazing things.
Yeah. So I want to turn also to the panelists and ask, do you guys have any questions for Denise?
I feel like I know Denise. Like, we've known each other in a former life, so I just, but I do want to say that, I think it's inspiring that you are taking your insights to a public stage, because, for foodies, for, for women, whatever industry that can align themselves with you, it's so important that we see role models. I mean, it's one thing to read a book. It's one thing to, have your parents say you can do it. It's another thing to hear men say that you can do it, right? But when you see a woman that is doing it, that has done it, and that will come back and share her insights and advice with you, it means so much. And we have to support each other as women. We have to.
I agree, and it's interesting because I remember I always said that one of the reasons why I like doing this and having these kinds of conversations, because I would have loved it when I was a younger woman to have had that in my career. I had some great men mentors, but it again, it's blazing another trail. So what kind of tactically, what would your advice be to kind of all of us in terms of reaching out to people that we want to learn from or maybe work with? I think I say networking is working, and the first thing you got to get over is that when you network, it's not fooling around. It's actually working, and it's serious business. Now, you're all into social networking, so I'm probably preaching to the converted here, but sometimes it's really scary to say, well, gee, I'd like to network with that person, but I don't know them. What am I going to do? Just call up a stranger and say, hi, I want to network with you? It doesn't work that way. And somebody taught me this. That's why I'm passing it on to you. You use 6 degrees of separation. You always know someone who knows that person you want to talk to. So you call to someone that you know and you say, would you mind just opening the door for me? They say, of course I will. And then you say to them, and if there's anything I can do for you, let me know. And then they open the door for you and you walk in and you have the relationship. And so I just think there's an art and a science to it. We do it innately in some cases, but when it's about our careers or our business or something, sometimes we're just a little hesitant. And I think that it's just try and get somebody that to open those doors, and it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah. There's actually a widget for that on LinkedIn. So in social networking terms.
That's social networking now, which is so great. I mean, it's this, but something, there is the art and science of the relationship too, and you can have the relationships in social media, but there's also the personal touch and the conversations and the two-way dialogue, and I think that's the wonderful part of communication today, is you've got so many different options.
Brooke, I know earlier you had actually talked about when you were starting, being able to just reach out to people. Do you remember anyone in particular that you reached out to and kind of how you ended up getting in front of that person?
I think to echo, I think the asking for intros has been super helpful. Like anyone, I mean, LinkedIn is a great tool for that, seeing who you know that knows that person. And usually if it's from a trusted person and they've agreed to meet you, that's been like the most helpful. I think that's countless intros I can thank LinkedIn for that.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any advice for how they've kind of reached out to people that they want to get in front of or get advice from?
I've used LinkedIn to actually write folks that I haven't known, and what I've found, I've actually met 2 great mentors through reaching out to people cold on LinkedIn. And what worked for me was having a specific reason in the note so that they knew that I was contacting them and I had researched them and found out that they had the specific expertise that I wanted to have contact with. I've also reached out to other people that I never heard back from, but I did wind up with 2 wonderful mentors that I'm still in touch with today, and those emails, I think I sent them years ago at this point.
Yeah. And I think also,
I think if you look at mentoring as subject matter expertise too, you won't have just one mentor in your career. There's a number of people that can mentor you on specific things too. But again, I always remind people that if you do seek a mentor or multiple mentors, always think about what you can give to that relationship as well, because you have a lot to give.
And there's a lot of focus with women on mentoring, but what about sponsoring? Have you had someone who pulled you up that was like Denise's #1 fan and put you in opportunities.
You need sponsorship to open doors, and there's a difference between mentors and sponsors. Sponsors will see things in you that you might not see in yourself right away, and they will open those doors of opportunity to get you different assignments or different introductions or things that propel your career or propel your business. And so it's very important. I had many. And many, I mean, on one hand, you know, from my first district manager at Procter & Gamble to the president of Nestle to, you know, to my father actually was a big sponsor when I was a child. He saw things that women would be doing before the world was even open to women. And having 4 daughters, that was a good thing. So,
because I think about...
I'm sorry. I was going to ask, in line with sponsorship, how do you source that as an entrepreneur, as someone that's not around, you know, district managers all the time? Do you find the sponsors are good, you know, and clients? Is that like a conflict of interest, or where would it be?
I think what you might want to do is pursue some networks of entrepreneurs, of other entrepreneurs, or people that you've come across in your business or in your social networking that you admire and you would like to get to know better. And it's interesting, but forming those relationships will take you to some different places and sponsor you in ways that you might not have even envisioned when you first started the relationship.
I have one way of doing it. We have time.
Yes, go for it.
I'm just curious, like, Denise, I think it's so wonderful that you have a big focus on giving back, and I was curious, like, at what point in your career, like, obviously at the beginning, you're looking kind of more for help, and then at what point it sort of switched, and if that was, like, a clear switch or something that happened very gradually.
Yeah, well, giving back, it actually started as early as childhood when Maggie, my first business partner, when we were little kids, did carnivals for muscular dystrophy, and we learned to make a profit and make a difference. And quite frankly, we're still doing that today in our work. And at Campbell's, for example, we do a lot in Camden, New Jersey with healthy communities and helping with the obesity issue. 40% of the kids at Camden are obese, and so bringing nutrition education and physical fitness to those communities and fresh food and good food, we're really passionate about that. So I think, but one of the things I've always worked on ever since I started in business was advancing women leaders, and I also advance a lot of men's careers as well, but particularly with women where I can be a role model, I've always been involved in nonprofits and things where I can share stories or give classes or speak at different events, just to do what we're doing here, have the conversation that maybe you get one nugget and it makes your life a little bit better and you can take this thing to the next level, because that's what I'd like you to do.
Cool.
Very cool.
I really like that, profits with purpose.
Yes.
And
yes.
That's something, I'm wondering, Molly, too, if you've seen this. That's something I'm seeing with a lot of Gen Y with starting companies, and also specifically with women starting companies, is we are always looking for...
You have to have a higher order purpose. Yes.
Yeah. Have you been if you've been seeing that, and kind of what are some maybe of the favorite companies that you've seen?
Campbell.
Good answer.
Well, we just bought Plum Organics, which is a premium organic baby food company, which I love. And the founder, Neil Grimmer, and his wife founded this company because they were home like mashing vegetables for their baby and said, there's got to be a better way than this. And so they founded this company, and it's just so inspiring, you know, to see it now blossom into this wonderful business. And you know, we just acquired it, and we just want to make Neil and his wife's dream bigger. So it's really cool.
Well, I think, you know, I think millennials are very social good conscious, even if, you know, by mistake, which I actually appreciate. You know, like I look at myself, you know, in addition to the community giving that, you know, I was just told to do. I'm in a community charitable sorority. You know, my family brought me up, you know, giving and serving at soup kitchens but one thing that, you know, I subconsciously look for are like the Warby Parkers that, you know, donate glasses, you know, when you buy a pair of glasses, or, you know, the Havaiana sandals that, you know, will also donate a pair of sandals. So, you know, I think that as companies do it more, it kind of becomes this sort of subconscious thing that's, you know, that's beautiful. You know, whether it's conscious or unconscious, giving is something that we have to do as a community. I also am really appreciative of the sort of fresh food movement. I'm in Newark, New Jersey, and, you know, urban areas especially, you know, get hit hard with obesity. You know, and it's not a matter of, you know, necessarily being poor. It's a matter of being uneducated. If you weren't, you know, groomed to know how to eat, to know portion size, to know what a fresh vegetable looks like, you just don't know. So, you know, I really think this movement has given people education, has given people perspective, and it hasn't shamed people, because that's what I think has not worked, shaming people for not knowing how to eat and how to, you know, what fresh food looks like. If you've never seen it, you just don't know. So, my two cents.
I really love the culture of giving back, you know. I think one of the favorite things that I've gotten to do is I got to talk to about 200 high school women about entrepreneurship and really just encourage them to be, I don't care if it's the most ridiculous, crazy idea, you know, kind of like you're saying you do in the innovation groups. I want to hear it and share what you're thinking. And it's amazing to watch what you can do by giving back and by spending time with other people. And just, I think that that's one of the things that you guys are doing clearly here, and that everyone here on the panel is doing is too. Are there other kind of things that you guys are doing that you're taking joy from and giving back, or other groups you're involved with?
I'll jump in. So I'm really involved in my college alumni board. And what's interesting is earlier when people were talking about finding mentors and about, you know, finding people via LinkedIn, I get the quarterly alumni magazine, and as soon as it comes to my door, I read word for word. And if there is someone who's been written about or featured who's doing something inspiring, I always reach out to them. And I think what's interesting is that shared commonality of having gone to the same place and sharing the same value of education allows you to easily start that conversation with someone. And I, in turn, have tried to do the same thing through the alumni board with current students. So I go back and speak about marketing. I go back and speak about job hunting as a millennial, things that I can offer to them that cost me nothing, to be able to share with them the successes that I've had, the people that have helped me along the way. And I think, you know, though there are certainly so many worthy causes from, you know, health research and all sorts of things like that, I think mentoring the people in your own community is also really important. And Denise, you're certainly doing that at Campbell's. Lindsay's talking about doing that in her community. I think if you can give back to the people who are part of your own group, who you may not even realize need that, you're really doing people an excellent service.
Absolutely. Right. I think doing things like this, you all have people that you know that you can share your experiences with, and then it becomes the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes. I want to do kind of a rapid fire question with everyone here and hear what to date has been the biggest risk you've taken. So, Anna, let's start with you.
I don't know what the biggest risk I've taken so far in my life has been. I actually don't tend to register things as risk. I just look for new opportunities and what's the biggest thing that I can be involved in and go for it. So maybe my answer is I haven't taken it yet.
I like that. I like that mindset of just seeing it all as opportunities. So maybe we'll shift the question to actually, what is the opportunity that you've taken that you're really proud of yourself for taking? Brooke, do you want to jump in on that one?
Mine's easy. Mine was just the decision to leave a kind of a cushy job and start my own company. Like that one's kind of clear for me. That was the biggest risk I've taken thus far.
Yeah, and it's going really well.
Yeah, we'll see. No, it's been great. It's been great. It was a good decision. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made.
That's probably the biggest risk we're all going to take as entrepreneurs. Leaving a job where you just know you're guaranteed to get paid. You can leave at 5 and go to sleep and not worry, and in 2 weeks you get a paycheck, to, starting a business. But with me, it really is just jumping into an industry that was brand new. I mean, we've never really seen a new industry, if you think about it, in our lifetime, and social media marketing or digital marketing is new. So like I said, I was broke forever because no one knew what I was talking about. But, the love, the quest for being a pioneer was so deep that has been the biggest risk I just had to take.
Yeah, I like that. Megan?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned it was when I left, that Clout at the time had 80 people, was pretty well funded, sort of, maybe not cushy, but cushier than, moving across the country to New York. I never lived on the East Coast before. Definitely very different from Eugene, Oregon, which is where I'm from. And, consulting to make money. Closing clients for the first time, and working with Rebel Mouse, which obviously, as of yet, feels like a great decision.
Definitely. And then Molly?
I feel a little bit like an echo chamber with what I'm about to say, but I think for me, I actually started my career in finance, and I wore a suit to work every day, and I worked for a very serious person in a very serious company, and I thought, I've got it made, I'm 21, this is it. And I think after a couple of years, when I realized I really felt my strengths were lying somewhere else, it was a big decision to say, you know what, I'm going to leave this behind, all of the comforts and sort of the acceptance from the broader professional community of what it means to be here and have this job, to go after what I think is really better for me. And, I had to start again in a totally new profession and kind of humble myself back to the beginning and learn the ropes. But I think once I was really in a place where I felt like everything I was doing was more exciting and made more sense for me, it just became natural and felt like I should be here. This was absolutely the right thing to do. But when I decided to leave, I got some hairy eyeballs. And I think you have to just know in your gut that if you're itching towards this one thing and it won't go away, that you're probably on the right track.
I like that.
So one of my opportunities is, how do I make food that delights your generation? And we make great food at Campbell's, but always listening to what are the things that are important to you and to your generation is something that's really important to me. And it's an opportunity, it's a risk, but it's one I think that's very much worth taking.
Definitely. Well, we are actually now out of time.
Oh.
And this has just been so inspiring and so wonderful. And I'm really, something I'm really taking away from this is how many themes I saw come up from your journey and also everyone's here.
Yes, thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you so much. And I think the big thing is it's really this idea that you see the end goal and you take calculated risks. You are not alone. You have people to reach out to. And then you have wonderful women like you who have made it for us to role model ourselves after. So thank you guys all for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time today.
Bye. Thank you.
Enjoy your days.